Hey everybody, this is DJ and welcome to Architects of Imagination, a game dev podcast where we talk to the brilliant minds behind your favorite video games. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce my good buddy, Jessica Tams. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks.
So Jessica, we have known each other for a while, mostly from GDC, pretty much. Every time I hang out with you, it's an amazing conversation. I usually meet some other super fascinating people. Why don't we start by just tell us what you're up to now? You got a few things going. So give us a big overview.
Yep. So I am an advisor and active investor. I'm also on the board of directors for Atari and a strategic advisor for MISC, which is a foundation out of the Middle East. And most recently, I am starting up a game development studio.
Exciting, and not announced yet, right? So you can't talk about
not
the
announced,
name or
but very shortly, hopefully. I think everybody knows about it, but
okay,
we'll pretend.
The worst kept secret. Well, keep an eye out for that, everyone. So you mentioned you're on the board of directors for Atari. We all know Atari from classic Atari 2600 and the older days. And I've been on a bit of a retro kick. I don't know if you can see it, but there's Ultima 4. I'm playing on my laptop right now. What is Atari up to these days?
So Atari's doing a couple of things. So first, obviously, they are preserving and remastering a lot of the old classics, acquiring back a lot of the games and IPs that Atari lost during bankruptcy, which you probably remember. Yeah. And they're also working on original IP.
Very cool. So, new Atari games.
New Atari games. And you probably saw the Atari 50 that came out. And that got a lot of really good press and attention as well.
Awesome. That's exciting. Well, since we can't talk about your current new company, why don't we take a step back into the past? Okay. Tell us about your getting started in the industry. What was the first game you worked on? And before that, looking at your bio, you were in UW physics PhD program, and then ended up in video games. Tell us how that happened.
Video games.
And where you got your start.
When I got my start. So when I went to college at Utah State, and I majored in math, physics, and computer science. And so during the summers, I went and did research projects like every good undergraduate should do. And the first one I did at University of Colorado Boulder. And the second one was at the University of Washington that has actually a very good physics program. And so when I was looking to go to grad school, I ended up at the University of Washington. And then, of course, it was the .com. Things were super exciting. And so I just couldn't stay away. And I went to a job fair while I was at grad school. And there was Sierra Online. And they had so many awesome games, if you remember. Classic, and I went up to their booth and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to work here. And they gave me a job as a programmer. And so that was my very first job, was from a career fair, dropping out of a physics program, PhD program. And it was great. Like I remember my early 20s living in Seattle. They were amazing. And I could never expect anything better. I don't go back and think, oh, I wish that I would have done something else. But it was great. Everybody that I worked with was great. This is hindsight, of course. Everything's super rosy. Yeah. But Seattle was magical at that time, and it was a pretty good time to be in the industry.
Yeah. I had a similar experience with Seattle. I was born and raised. We'll get into it in a little while. We've got a little tangent where our lives may have overlapped a little bit in Utah, but I grew up in LA, born and raised there. My wife, born and raised there. And I was up in Seattle for 8 years, and man, was it just a blast. I loved it. I still have close friends to this day from there, and it was kind of just magical. I don't know if it was the time.
It was magical.
What time period was this that you were up there?
It was in 2000. Sorry, oh my heavens, 1997 until 2008.
That's crazy.
Seattle.
that's almost exactly overlaps. I landed up there 99 to work at Wild Tangent and was
Yeah.
there till 2008.
Yep. I think
Where,
I can remember that.
yeah,
It
I was
was,
at,
I think it was great in Seattle because Microsoft acted as an incubation for the games industry there. So there was a lot of money, people exiting from Microsoft. Obviously, Valve came from there, Wild Tangent came from there, Real Networks came from there, and then there was spin-offs from Real Networks. So it was Microsoft, Real Networks, and then like Big Fish, right?
yeah,
So
PopCap
lots
came
of
out of there.
lots of exciting projects, lots of money. Obviously, the .com boom really helped uh,
Yeah.
bring a lot of new blood into the city, and so it was just a bunch of young tech people trying to make great product and obviously have fun. I'm
Yeah,
focusing on the have fun because that's what I
yeah.
remember.
For sure. Man, I had a like I worked at a few places in Seattle during that period and they were all just a blast. And I've thought about like why and I've worked at other places since and the magic's different at every place you go, but for me
Mhm.
anyway, when I was at Wild Tangent was my first job up there, so from 99 to about 2005, almost the entire company were like imported employees and most of them very young, like just out of school.
Mhm.
So half of us roomed together, shared
Yeah.
apartments. I mean, we none of us knew anyone but each other. So we all went to lunch together, we went to the bar at night, we partied on the
Hmm.
weekend, we played in each other's D&D games, and it was just this like built-in friend group. Yeah, from
It
Wild Tangent,
was.
from FASA and Bungie. Those are some of the spots, and yeah, it was a great place, great time.
Yeah, I think that we forget as we get older and we get our own families, we get our own kids, we have our longstanding friend group that in many ways when people come out of college and they're coming to our companies to work, it is like an extension of college or an extension of high school. And young adults, they're still figuring out who they are. They might be a little crazy, they might get into trouble, they might do really stupid stuff. I'm sure you did stupid stuff.
Sure.
I know I did stupid stuff. Do you like how I said that you did stupid stuff
I,
first?
I certainly stupid stuff landed me in Seattle. I had to get out of California.
But it's something that I think that we as leaders in the industry who've been here for a while, we need to understand that these these people, these these young adults that are coming to us, they need to have mentorship and they need to have a place to live where they can afford to live and they can not commute for 2 hours each way because they need to have a house because they're going to get married or they're going to have a baby. And back when we were in Seattle or even in LA, we were able to buy houses, have get apartments, live our lives. And I remember thinking back when I was younger, like people in New York, because it was so expensive in New York. I'm like, how can they possibly live in New York? And they would live in studio apartments and they'd have roommates. And
Yeah.
that's what's largely happened now on the West Coast for game developers is the 20, 30-year olds. It's a really difficult situation that they're in.
Yeah, and I just read, and I was surprised by this, that Seattle has just surpassed LA for cost of living, or maybe it's Bellevue, but yeah,
Really? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
that was a surprising statistic I just read. Just before we were recording, we were talking a little bit about mental health, and this
Hmm.
kind of segues nicely into that. Um, Tell me some of your thoughts on preserving mental health. There's sort of well documented instances of um mistreatment in the games industry. I think of, there's been class action lawsuits, and
Hmm.
what are some ways in which it goes wrong? What are some ways to remedy it? You and I are both kind of, entrepreneurs starting our own companies now and can do it however we want. We can change things. We can do a better
Yeah.
job. So tell me some of the things that you guys are talking about, thinking about
So,
to make sure your employees are mentally healthy and happy.
so I think one of the biggest problems that, I mean, I don't want to, it's talked about so much, but I'm going to mention it is that we did just experience a lockdown with the pandemic. And so a lot of the new employees that are coming coming out. Some of them missed senior year. Some of them were in the pandemic and lockdowns when they were in college. So they were young adults. They were away from home. Maybe they even had to go back home. Maybe their university was delayed. There's a lot of issues that that I'm seeing with my friends' kids, specifically, with just coming to terms with the fact that their lives were disrupted at such a pivotal time. So I think that's something that we need to really be aware of. That was not such a problem before, because kids in the past, I don't want to say that everything was easy, but I think it was a little bit easier for us as we were graduating. The economy was great. There was lots of jobs. And right
Yeah.
now it's hard. Housing is expensive. Salaries are not always high. Like we hear about salaries from Google and Facebook, but not everybody's at Google or Facebook.
Yeah.
And a lot of people did have, some social trauma from the pandemic. So I think that's really that's hard. Another thing with parents in the workforce, we're really aging. If you remember back when we were younger, like everybody on the team was not everybody, almost everybody on the team was in their 30s. Very rarely did you have coworkers that had children. Now it's really common, or I would say most people are
Yeah.
having children. And I know you have a daughter, or you raised a daughter.
Uh, uh, the non-binary child
Yeah.
was a daughter. Now their pronouns are they them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing. Recently, I changed my social media to have the she, her.
Uh-huh.
Um, Embracing that is something that I've noticed. It's really hard for somebody to come and say, oh, I have new pronouns. It's something that might be embarrassing or hard. I know that I've seen some people struggle with that, like on accepting it and also with expressing it. So that also very important. And I think as we get older, there's a lot of health issues that we need to think about. Like, are people getting out? Are they exercising? Are they going to the doctor? Are they not working 12 hours a day? And maybe you could handle it when you're in your 20s, but it's as you get older, it's a lot more important to get out, exercise, eat some fruits and vegetables, make some dinner, spend some time with your family, not spend all day at the office. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll
I
tell
don't
you
know.
a few things we have done to ensure that our it was one of our founding principles of this company is that we wanted to do better in that regard. Um, and we just put some very concrete things behind it. We have just policies that are published on our website that you can go read that talk about some of them. One is that we have banned crunch. We don't allow it at
Mhm.
all. Um, we've never asked anyone to work on a weekend. And the assumption is that everyone stops after 8 hours. We want them to go be with their families and enjoy their lives and have hobbies. Um, Another one that we did was recently we made siestas a codified policy. So everyone is invited to take a nap after lunch, which I love to do. Naps are great. Um, Another thing that we did that was kind of interesting, you can't, it's just off screen here, but I call it the Brady Bunch screen. We've got what I think we're an all remote company, so there's this like, this Zoom Slack world that we're in now, right? Where there's meetings and stand-ups over video calls, and it can be, I don't know, I'm just personally a bit meeting averse. Like I try not to go because it kind of like your day ends up kind of revolving around them a little bit. So we kind of turned it on its head. We've just got an always on room. So our employees are invited to just pop in whenever they like when they log in the morning if they want to be social. And if
Mhm.
they don't have to. And it's kind of more, most of it is just kind of banter. We're just there talking
Yeah.
about what
Do
games we're
most people
playing.
log on?
About half, two-thirds do. And it is different. If you want to focus on something you're working on that day, don't log on.
Yeah.
So that's
Interesting.
been kind of nice.
Yeah, I think that is hard for a lot of people to not have the ability to go into the office. Working from home is not always advantageous for people, especially if they have, others at the house, because it's, difficult to focus and then difficult to do, to just detach yourself from what's going on at home. So
Yeah.
that's that's one thing that we're looking into, is to actually have an on-site office
Okay.
and not do the remote work, not do hybrid, don't do remote,
Okay. Everyone
which is
come in.
totally different. I'll be the
And
only one in the whole world.
now, I've heard that policies like that are backfiring on some companies. Some of the bigger studios are now mandating you need to come back
Hmm.
in, and they're getting just people straight up quitting over it.
Yeah,
Because I don't know, it's kind of nice. in my-
it is nice. I started working from home in 2006 with
yeah.
Casual Connect. For many reasons, it was mostly from home, and it's really nice to work from home. But there's some good things and there's some bad things. But the really good thing about the games industry is that there are enough jobs and enough companies that people can go and they can find a company that works for them. And so if they want to come into the office, then they should find a job that you come into the office. And if they want to stay at home because they like their pajamas, then they should stay at home. And if they want to be able to work any hours and not even check in and not even have a party line, there's companies that are like that.
Yeah.
So it's good for people to be able to have the choice. And I know, like, you're like referring to Blizzard, but I'm sure that there's lots of employees at Blizzard that will be able to go and find a job. It won't be a problem, and Blizzard will be able to fill those roles with somebody who wants that type of environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of each its own, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Company fit. One thing I was thinking about this week, talking to someone about, like, I saw a post about an interview tactic where a company, um, they like, there's the coffee test, they called it. Well, they'll leave out a coffee cup. They'll offer you coffee in the morning, and the test is to see what you do with the cup when it's empty. Do you leave it there for
Give
someone?
it away.
Do you clean it and put it away? Like,
Hmm.
do you ask what to do? Do you, just kind of make assumptions? And I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. And then they went on to point out like a couple other things that they do too. I'm like, I was appalled. They were like, they set up, they have someone, a pair of people yell at each other to see how you handle like stress, and they keep you waiting in the lobby to like increase your. I'm like,
What?
that is
Really?
bomb. Yeah, there's a whole write up about this. I'm like, the, the interview process is going in two directions. Like, I would stay so far away from a company that's doing stupid shit like that. Like,
Kind of
no, I'm
weird.
not going to tolerate a work environment. But to your point, right? Like, there's different types of workplaces for different people, and times have changed a lot. Like the older days of, like the boss giving commands on high that you are to execute. It's a kind of a different world now. I don't think that's sort of the management style that's quite as
No,
common anymore.
it's a little nicer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's generational. It's because our generation, we're getting older.
Yeah.
And we're like, let's just be nice to each other.
Yeah. You mentioned Casual Connect a little bit. Tell us about that a little bit. It was an event that you were running for quite a while. You've exited
Hmm.
from it now. You had me to Jerusalem.
I
Or
did.
was it Tel Aviv or Jerusalem?
It was Tel Aviv,
It was Tel Aviv.
but I'm pretty sure we went to Jerusalem, if you remember. Um, so Casual Connect was an event that I started because I was in the casual gaming space and we didn't have a platform for people to, in the casual gaming space, to really speak with each other, meet with each other, do business. And so I was like, yeah, let's do something. So I did some events, and I still actually was working. And so I was just doing it as a volunteer part time. And then the company I worked for sold. And so I decided to just do Casual Connect for a little, for a bit full time,
Yeah.
because it was just so much work. It was just overwhelming. So I thought, okay, I'll start this up. I'll hire somebody. I'll get an event management company, and then it'll be fine, and we'll have a board, and it'll just work. But then what ended up happening is it just became so much work that I just never stopped. And so I ran that for 15 years,
Oh
and
man.
it went through a lot of changes. And we did a lot of really fun things. Like we went to Tel Aviv, obviously, and you came and spoke. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of friendships that come from traveling to a foreign place and meeting with somebody, just like you were saying with Monolith. You know, you came, you got a job, you were new to Seattle, there's 100 of you, and you're all there. And what do you do other than become best friends for life?
Yeah.
And that's what's really special about the conferences is that people come in, they see each other, and there's something about knowing somebody for a long time, not necessarily spending a lot of time, as in like hours or minutes together, but knowing each other for 20 years. So it's like, yeah, I know you. I knew what you looked like 20 years ago. And I know what you were like 20 years ago. And now you're a different person and you look different, but you're still the same. You know, like people don't really change. And there's something that I just find so special about that. And all the friendships that I've made all over the world, because we did events in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and Asia, as well as obviously the United States. And it's been great to see parts of the world really develop their development talent. And it was a great experience. And like,
Yeah.
just like being a developer in Seattle, it was the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah. And MISC is the one of the organizations you're involved with
Hmm.
too. One thing that I was surprised, and my other friend Allison has had me out to the Middle East to speak in
Yep.
Jordan.
Hmm. There it is.
There's there's
Yeah. So one thing to really be aware of is the Middle East is they have a lot of youth, very, very young population, and they like playing video games. And so the vast majority of people in Saudi actually self-identify themselves as gamers, which is different than here. Here, how many people identify themselves as gamers? You know, 10%, 15%. Over there, they're like 60, 70, 80% of
oh
people
wow.
are going to say, yeah, I'm a gamer. Yeah, I'm a gamer. And so it's a huge market, big opportunity for companies to get in and understand what sells there, because it is slightly different. Art styles are a little different, gameplay obviously a little different, some of the themes. And
Yeah.
so finding somebody who is from the Middle East and having them review your game to make sure that it's appropriate is
Yeah.
definitely it's definitely worth it. And I'm pretty proud of the work that we've done. I've been helping them for about 3.5 years, and the kingdom has really changed. You can do some Googling for all the laws that have changed. But
Okay.
in our office, about half of the employees are women.
Great.
Yeah, the head of animation is actually a woman that's there. And so I think it's a lot of change in a short period of time. But since the country is so young, it's been, that's just normal. So changes happened 5 years ago. And so if you were 16, they're 21 right now. And so they're the bulk of the work, or, a big portion of the workforce has always seen women being able to have jobs. And they have movie theaters now, and the headscarves are gone, and the guardian system's gone, and women are driving. And obviously they're working because they're working with me.
Yeah.
And and it's great. And I'm really proud of the team and really proud of everybody in the country that's made the changes.
That's amazing. That's really wonderful to hear. One thing that struck me while I was there too is a lot of the games that they're playing are from the States or Japan or European countries, and there just
Hmm.
wasn't a lot of content that was like sort of for them, by them for them, right?
Hmm.
With the sort of cultural themes that they experience in television shows and local movies. Um, and I got to review a couple of games that were being worked on, and that was interesting. That's kind of what they're bringing up is people with development studios out there focusing on games that are for them.
Yep. And that's one thing that the division that I work with out of Misk, which is the manga, they are creating content that is tailored towards that region
Awesome.
and publishing. So if you want to publish your game, you can get in touch with them in the
All
Middle
right.
East.
Let's talk about I know some of the things that you've worked on. Tell us what your favorite project is that you've ever been involved with. Which video game?
I don't know. Um,
I know I've got a favorite that you
you
worked
have a
on.
favorite?
Yeah, Dungeon Siege was awesome. I love
Yeah,
Dungeon Siege a
it
lot.
was. It was. Chris is a great designer and, really passionate. I think that like every project, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just rose colored here, but there's just, there's so many exciting things that happen. And even if things went haywire, you sure learned a lot from that project, from a project. But I would say living in Seattle was great. So Dungeon Siege was a great opportunity. I learned so much. There's awesome programmers that I got to work with on that team. Obviously, Chris, is a good designer and very passionate. He's obviously well known. Most people have heard of him or seen him speak at industry events. And let's see. So my first project was Gabriel Knight 3, and that was amazing because it was my first job. So that was exciting.
Awesome.
And I really, probably the thing that's really stuck with me is when we went into Kyiv in Ukraine at the beginning. So in 2005, they opened up visas. And so we went in 2006. And it was a very small industry. We went into Ukraine because both Russians and Westerners from Europe and from the United States could come in without visas. And so it was a meeting point for Russia and the West to come together. And so most of the attendees were actually not from Ukraine. They were from Russia and the Western states, the Western regions coming in. And over the course of, 12 years, the industry went from very small, nobody really took them seriously, to a really strong industry with most of the big publishers actually having offices there. So I would say that's one of the biggest changes that I saw, that I was like, yeah, like I made that happen. I brought everybody there. And it wasn't always easy because, people are prejudiced and you don't know it until you try and get people to go to, to try to get them to go to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And you'll hear all sorts of things. Or, if you're trying to get them to take, the Middle East seriously, you can also see that. Yeah. And so it was a little challenging, and it was a bet, I should say, like it was a statement like, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to bring Russia and the West together. And it worked. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, and it has really come up a lot too. There's a ton of it is or was, I don't even know the term to use right now, but there's a ton of external external development studios in Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
where they've got tons of animators and modelers and programmers.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's been changed, right? The war
Yeah,
has
it's challenging.
has
Yeah.
changed some things. We know, just through friends of friends, people who work in game dev that are now displaced, and have made it to various countries. And yeah, that was a little heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
Um, my
I'm sure it'll. I'm bad that way. I'm like, yeah, it's almost over. And yeah, on one hand, and then the other hand, I'm like, no, it's just gonna go on for a while. So
yeah.
we'll see.
Well, my next question was going to have been on my list, a funny moment in game dev, but that's the worst segue in history. So let's put that
Actually,
one on.
I can tell you, when I saw that question, I was like, I don't have any funny moments.
Get out of here. There's stupid shit happens in games
I
too,
know.
all
Well,
the time.
maybe, but I realized that I'm not a very fun person
Yeah,
because I don't have any of these funny stories. And my whole career, bringing people together, and we'd go and party and we'd go and have fun, but trying to think like, what was a funny moment? Like, I don't even know. I don't remember. So see,
Well,
that's a perfect segue that I'm a
every,
very
every
serious person that has no fun.
every time I see you at GDC and get a beer with you, you crack me up with with stuff that's probably not appropriate for a podcast. But all
Maybe.
right. um, well, let's look to the future a little bit. How about games? They've come so far, from Ultima 4 here
Hmm.
to the PS5 and the Xbox. Man, the naming convention on the Xbox, it drives me a little crazy. The Xbox Series X, I think, is the current most powerful one. Um, but let's look beyond that. I like to think about the future. AI, AI is making
Hmm.
a ton of headlines right now. Where do you see it going? Where is there something that you are excited about for the future of gaming? Things we can't do now that we will be able
Gonna
to
do
in
in
the
the future.
future? What are
Yeah.
what are some ideas around that excite you?
So one of the key roles, I guess, in Casual Connect is thinking about what is going to be the next big thing, because we had to set up content and give speaking slots to the people who we thought, were on the cutting edge with stuff that wasn't just going to falter, that was actually going to do something. And so who you pick as the keynote can have, almost make or break their company. And so I think the key when I'm looking forward is that you really need to be able to embrace new technologies, but still focus on what really matters. And that's just a strong, pleasurable player experience. And so players, they don't care how much money you're making. They don't care about your monetization methods. And so those are changes in the market that ultimately really aren't going to even be noticeable from history. But I do think that some of the technologies do change the way that we do play games, and AI is going to have a big impact on that. But I think that what we need to be thinking about as game developers is not how do I integrate AI, and necessarily which tools am I going to integrate and how am I going to use those, because the tools are out there and everybody's going to integrate them, and that just becomes standard practice. That's not really getting ahead. You're not really getting ahead by embracing AI. You're just keeping up. But what you need to think about is what types of games are going to work and be viable with AI. And so if you think about, if you're making games, if they can be made via AI, then that's probably not a section that you want to be in, even though that is using AI. So somebody could come and say, oh, I have this great technology. I'm going to make 1 million games, and it's going to be so amazing because I'm going to have 1 million games. And the consumer is going to have so much choice because they have 1 million games. But that's not really, that is AI, and that sounds like really great tech, but that's not going to necessarily hit in the market. So one thing that we've been thinking about with the startup is how to develop and plan for a product where AI is there and you can take advantage of the ecosystem that has emerged from having AI around. So one of the key tenets that we have is we want to have character driven stories that go across film and TV and games. And we can't just as game developers say we're going to make an IP, and then, the film, they're just going to want to use it because it's going to be so awesome because we're just amazing storytellers. And you see it from that side, but then when you're a good game developer, you see the people in film TV and they're like, oh, I'm going to make this IP, and then I can just license it over to games and it's going to be so amazing. And it just never works. And so I think the big takeaway, or one of the big takeaways from AI, is that IP is going to become more important, and cross-platform is going to become more important. Transmedia is going to become more important. And so in some ways, less content is going to be more. right? Like the old saying, I didn't have time to make my report shorter. So
Yeah.
here's my 500-page document. If I had more time, I could have made it one page.
Yeah.
I think
Y- you
that's
raise
AI.
one point in there that is kind of fascinating too, is like what are the areas where tech is not going to change anything for games? Like I think about, you sort of raise the point of like, the core fun of and gameplay loop of a game. Like I don't know what tech does to change that, if anything, right? Like you still need someone to make sure the timing and the feel and the buttons and what your this little response
Mm-hmm.
loop of changes into your eyeballs,
Yep.
being expressed in your hands. And I don't know what tech has there. So that's going to remain a critical job
Yep.
title and function for any game studio.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing that is definitely not going to change, and if you think about games, not just video games, but games as in board games, card games, sports games, it's the social aspect. And so a lot of us think about games and esports and multiplayer. Esports is filling a stadium and multiplayer as, 100 people running around in World of Warcraft. But it's not necessarily that. You can play sports or esports with your friends in your garage on an old CRT monitor playing Super Smash Brothers. And that works.
Yeah.
And that's an esport, and that's never going to change. And just think Dungeons and Dragons, because I had to bring it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dungeons and Dragons, like right now, like my oldest, he is constantly asking me to print off his player sheets. Like, oh, I got to print off this player sheet. Oh, we're going to play this. Can we play this? And it's that social element of game playing is something that will never change. Whether you're playing Hearts, or you're playing bridge, or you're playing soccer, or you're playing cricket, or you're playing Super Smash Brothers,
Yeah.
or Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Just the like band, and it's a changing world now, right? Where before D&D was all in person, now there's plenty of online play. Games are all
Mm-hmm.
online, and there's flavors of that too, where just the banter of friends just kind of talking shit to one another is wonderful and amazing. It's a good way to stay in touch with people. But then you get rando strangers online that are saying horrible things, and that's another
Yeah.
dynamic too. But just like with the internet and how many trolls there are, right? You need to like find ways to navigate and be happy in those spaces and not put up with nonsense.
Yeah. It's going to be it's going to be interesting to see what happens as more people, or as the younger generation actually is playing video games.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, Before we wrap up, I want to just talk about really briefly about. We always have a little segment where we talk about sort of inspiring those who aspire to be like you, to become the CEO of a studio. Do you have any advice for people? A lot of people get into games. You kind of worked your way up through as a programmer in your
Mm-hmm.
earlier days. Um, a lot of people work their way up through the ranks to become seniors and leads. It's very few people ended up creating their own studios. Do you have any advice for those who are looking
Do
to
that.
do that?
Just don't rush it. That's my biggest advice. Just enjoy the process, learn as you go along. I look back at my career, and every single job I had, I learned something. And I was able to be better at each of the subsequent jobs because of what I did previously. And I don't think I'd exchange any of the experience that I had, to get there faster. And there's no reason that you need to rush, because being a programmer is fun. And sometimes I wish I would have stayed programming longer, if
Yeah.
I'm totally honest, because I hear the like really cool things that people are doing. It's like, oh, I wish I was still a programmer. That would be so fun. And before AI was cool, I have to say
Right.
that. Before AI was cool, I remember talking to some of my programmer friends. I was like, I wish I was still a programmer because I would love to work on AI. Such an interesting problem.
Yeah.
And now they all get to work on AI. And if I wouldn't have rushed it, I could still be programming and I would finally be in my heyday here, like 25 years into my career. And yeah, I'm programming AI now. This is so exciting. It was worth the wait.
And you know what?
So
It's never too late to jump into that stuff. I recently started teaching myself programming. I've been learning C++, and this program behind Ultima there is
yeah.
a bit of software that I wrote. Yeah, and I've only been doing it a few years now. So
hmm
yeah,
Yeah.
programming's a
I
little
mean,
intimidating.
people come out of college, right, programming and they're engineers and they can do amazing things after 5 years. So there's no reason that you cannot become a programmer. They
Yeah, I've been
yeah.
learning through YouTube, YouTube videos. Well, thank you very much, Jessica, for joining me today. Before we go, I want to thank our executive producer, Martika Ibarra, our editor, Alex, and the whole team. If anyone wants to, you can find me. My own personal Twitch and YouTube channels are undertone_DJ. Jessica, do you have any? If anyone wants to follow you and what your new company is going to be up to, do you have any
Yeah,
social
just you
medias?
can follow me on I get LinkedIn probably is the best because then you can message me. And LinkedIn is actually great now. I don't know if you've been using it recently, but the
Yeah,
messaging works great. The feed
it's
is
come a
working
long
great.
way. There used to
Yeah.
be a thing where like you couldn't directly talk to anybody. You had to like
Yeah.
tell us where you know them from. I'm like, this is
hmm
weird. But yeah, now it's becoming more of an open social media like
Yeah.
platform, and it's been great. It's been cool to see friends that are doing really cool stuff that show up in there.
Yeah. I actually use LinkedIn preferably to email now because it's just easier to tracks it by person. You can go back and find things. So I guess there's my helpful hint of the day is LinkedIn's pretty awesome now.
Yeah, I'm finding myself using email less and less these days. Like a
hmm
lot's going through Slack. And thank you so much for joining us, Jessica.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
This is Architects of Imagination. We'll see y'all next time.